I'm going to ask if you can tell me the best reasons, if Biden were running again, based on his presidency of the last 4 years, to vote for him.
To vote for Joe Biden?
Yeah.
I was brought up in a Democratic family. Jerry Brown, on 2 occasions, appointed my mother Superior Court judge at Fresno County, and she was one of the first women to be a state appellate court judge. I have 2 first cousins whose mothers died and we essentially adopted, and I have 2 brothers, including a twin brother, who are strong Democrats to the extent 2 of them don't speak to me. So it's not as if I don't have experience with the Democratic arguments. I grew up that way. I don't know why I was a little different than my siblings, but they would argue that I was wrong and they were right. So what would be the argument for Joe Biden? Well, the argument would be that he still has remnants of old Joe Biden from Scranton. In other words, he represented an earlier tradition of the Democratic Party. What do I mean by that? In the 1992 and 1996 Democratic conventions, if you go back and look at the speeches of Nancy Pelosi, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, they called out for strong borders. They wanted to protect immigration by making it legal only. They called for, during that crime wave, 100,000 police officers, et cetera, et cetera. And Bill Clinton, whom I did not vote for, but nonetheless, in 1997 and 98, I think 99, partnered with Newt Gingrich. And that was the only administration that we got a balanced budget in over 100 years. And we were actually reducing the surplus. And that was partly because Newt Gingrich, the House Speaker, enforced a spending freeze, and Bill Clinton enforced on Newt Gingrich a moderate tax increase. And so he came from that generation. There were bad things about that generation. Joe Biden, for some reason, often praised James Old Easton, Strom Thurmond, who were segregation. Nevertheless, so when he came in, he was selected after losing the first 2 primaries on the part of the Democratic establishment by urging Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders to depart, even though he had not won a single primary until till South Carolina. So there was to get the thing out and to elect somebody. So the country and I was seeing the Democratic Party's realization that their current DEI, left-wing, hardcore trajectory would not win. Not me deciding that, the Democratic Party deciding that. So they turned to somebody that they knew was cognitively impaired, but they thought that cognitively impairment was a minor distraction, given he was the most electable. And why was he the most electable? Because he was running as a uniter, and old Joe Biden from Granton, a centrist Democrat, in comparison to all the other candidates. When he came into office, did he do that? No. But the point was he was an old-time politician, so he could adjust. And what do I mean by adjust? When the price of gasoline almost doubled, he did some things that were bad. He drained the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. He had called the Saudi Arabians pariahs, and then he went and begged them to pump more oil before the 2022 midterm. But he did some good things. And what was that? He suddenly increased federal leasing of energy. And the fact is, for a moment of a year or two, that's a moment in the history of petroleum, right now as we speak, there is more gas and oil production than even during the Trump administration. Joe Biden did that. He may have done it to get elected, it doesn't matter. That's been very good for the United States, both in terms of revenue and in terms of self-sufficiency. Joe Biden and the old Democratic Party, the Ted Kennedys, all of those people were strong supporters of Israel. Joe Biden is in a party that is not. Nevertheless, although he said yesterday that he has done more for Israel than any other president. That's demonstrably untrue. He said necessarily, Mrs. Harris said that she couldn't answer whether Netanyahu, the elected government, the Netanyahu government was an ally of the United States. And Waltz would not suggest that Israel had the right to respond to 500 missiles over 2 barrages to take out oil or nuclear. So there were problems there, but nonetheless, even though Joe Biden has suspended 2,000-pound bomb shipments to Israel, if you look at the totality, he has withstood the pressures within his party. And how does that manifest itself? When the first barrage of 320 projectiles was launched against Israel, and when the second barrage of 182 ballistic missiles, some of them hypersonic, United States forces helped Israel knock those down. And so while I would disagree with him, there's no doubt in my mind that if he were not president, the left wing would have left Israel without supplies or ability. So I commend him for that. I commend him for changing on energy. I understand it's an election year, and 12 to 15 million people have illegally entered the country. But he seems to have understood that about 65% of the American people do not want that. So suddenly, in the last 90 days, we're seeing border security enacted. And that was a reaction to political realities, but I don't really care what the motive was. At least it stopped the illegality and tries to restore the balance toward legal immigration. I could also say they all spend money. So the reason that we saw annual hyperinflation peak at one point at 9%, and that has caused an aggregate 25 to 30% over a 4-year period increase in staples, whether like you define that as rent, car insurance, house insurance, gasoline, milk, food, especially beef. And it's exactly what Democratic former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers warned about. That hyperinflation was deliberately caused by spending decisions that didn't have to be made. Why am I bringing this up? Because we were coming out of the COVID period in which Donald Trump had borrowed $4 trillion as stimulus. There was a supply chain interruption still. There was pent-up consumer demand. He shouldn't have done that. But my point is that they all do it. George W. Bush almost doubled, 80% the national debt over 8 years. Barack Obama did double it. Donald Trump came in. You can't double it in 4 years, but he was on a trajectory to nearly double it. And Joe Biden is on a trajectory to do the same. So all of them are reckless in spending, and now we have almost 37 trillion in aggregate debt. And I will give credit, as I said, to the only one of them who for a brief moment understood that and balanced the budget. And he didn't even balance the budget, Bill Clinton. He actually started to reduce the deficit, the national debt. And if we had kept on that trajectory, it was very similar to what Simpson Bowles had advocated, maybe not in the tax tables, but had we kept on that 1998-99 trajectory, we would almost have paid down the debt right now.